There was a time when BlackBerry used to be the coolest mobile phone on the market, but now you've probably forgotten their name. In today's episode of the Hezron Springer Show, I want to discuss how BlackBerry became so successful in the first place and also how they tragically lost it all. This is the rise and fall of BlackBerry.
I used to love my BlackBerry.
I still do.
BlackBerry, formerly known as Research in Motion, was launched in 1996, with their first product being the interactive pager. Pagers were sort of like cell phones, but not quite. The biggest disadvantage was, if your pager was either off or not in a service area, the pager would not receive the text or call. For this reason, pagers started to grow out of use as cell phones became more prominent and more easy to use for the average consumer. At this point, BlackBerry started to become a status symbol. You would frequently see the rich and the powerful use exclusively BlackBerries. This is because BlackBerries had a full-size QWERTY keyboard, making it easier to type than other mobile phones. Also, BlackBerry had push email, which meant as soon as you received new email from the server, it would be pushed to your phone automatically. This might sound really weird and odd, but back in those days, you'd have to keep constantly refreshing your email to get new emails to come onto your phone. As a young boy, up until this point, the coolest phones to have were Sony Ericsson Walkman phones. Nokia was also popular at that time, but it wasn't seen as cool by teens and young people, introducing the BlackBerry Curve, and specifically the 8520. This phone was affordable, priced at about £120, and this sent teenagers around the UK into a frenzy to get this phone. Not only did it have a full QWERTY keyboard which allowed for quick messages back and forth, but it also had something called BBM, which was BlackBerry's messenger service. All you had to do was pay a measly £10 a month and you could text your friends as much as you want. Again, this might seem really strange and kind of boring to you, but back in those days, you had to either pay per text to text someone, I think it was about 5p per text back in those days, or have a monthly package where you had a limited amount of text. So to have BBM unlimited for only £10 a month was an absolute revolution. All the young teens were loving it. We could text till our heart was content and we couldn't get enough. There were really 3 tiers to the level of BlackBerry user that you were. At the lowest end, which most people my age had, was the BlackBerry Curve 8520. This was Research in Motion's bottom of the barrel mobile phone, but it didn't have the finesse of the pricier models. If you were midway cool, you would get the BlackBerry 9300 3G Curve, and that was special because the 8520 was still running on the 2G cellular network. The BlackBerry Curve 3G, however, had 3G internet, allowing much faster web surfing and a smoother experience for video streaming. But if you were really cool, if you wanted to be elite status, back in those days in the UK schools, you would have to have a BlackBerry Bold. This was the top of the line BlackBerries they had at the time, and they costed a lot of money. In a way, it was quite a scam really, because it was all the same thing. It had the same QWERTY keyboard, it had the same look, it had the same 3G, but it just looked better. It had this prestige, look at me, business class look. Back then, just about every single kid had a BlackBerry. Because if you didn't have a BlackBerry, you would be left out. Everything was popping off on BBM. But then, 2007 happened.
These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device. And we are calling it iPhone. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
Steve Jobs rolled through with the Apple iPhone in 2007, mocking all of his competitors in the process. The problem was everyone wanted an iPhone, but most kids could simply not afford one. Being it that you could buy a BlackBerry Curve for around £120, the £400 Apple was asking for was way too much money for a little teenager. But deep down inside, we all wanted one. I remember when the first 2 people in our year got an iPhone. It was the day it came out and they came straight to school and they showed it off to the nth degree. Listen, they were popular instantly. Everyone wanted to see this iPhone. I cannot stress how big of a deal the iPhone was to have an all touchscreen display made by Apple, this kind of like computer geek company that had finally made a phone that looked cool, that had cool games like Temple Run. I cannot stress how cool it was to have an iPhone. And within quick succession, BlackBerry soon became out of style. After just 2 years of the release of the first iPhone, BlackBerry's exponential growth suddenly stopped. And by a year after that, they were on a sharp decline. There was no going back, and BlackBerry was on a downhill crash to their demise. My last BlackBerry was the BlackBerry Curve 3G 9300. But one day I was scrolling through the phone website to look for a new phone, and I saw that the iPhone 5 was only £24 a month. Finally, it had become cheap enough where even I, as a young boy, was able to afford one. So I bought one straight away, and I never looked back. Honestly speaking, the moment the iPhone was released by Steve Jobs and Apple was the moment that BlackBerry died. Even though BlackBerry saw that companies like Apple and Android were having amazing phone sales with their new all touchscreen operating systems, they decided to keep holding on to their guns by offering mainly still QWERTY keyboards and not jumping over to the all touchscreen smartphone revolution. Unfortunately, BlackBerry remained on its high horse of utmost success. Completely blinded by the drug of their past money-making success, they thought that they would always be that way and remain successful. They only saw Apple and Android as competitors, but not complete, ultimately game-changing companies which would blow them out of the map. BlackBerry's first proper smartphone was the BlackBerry Z10, released in 2013. But by then, it was too little, too late, as by that point, everyone loved either Samsung or Apple. BlackBerry wasn't even in the race anymore. And even then, BlackBerry was still making smartphones with QWERTY keyboards, showing their complete and utter ignorance to the market trend. And that was that consumers did not want a QWERTY keyboard in their phones anymore. If this was true, you would still see QWERTY keyboards being popular. QWERTY keyboards are nice. I love to use a real-life physical QWERTY keyboard, but the pros that comes with a full touchscreen device simply cannot be ignored, and it was far better than what BlackBerry had to offer. If BlackBerry was really smart, back in the 2010s, they would have joined the Android master race and released some of their hardware with the Android operating systems. But unfortunately, BlackBerry remained narcissistic in the belief that they could be superior even with their own operating systems. But BlackBerry, because of all their previous success, because that they were so successful for so long and they had a market domination on certain industries for such a long time, and because they were growing so fast at an exponential rate for so long, they thought that they could make their own hardware and software and still beat Apple and Android. It was never meant to be, and it was never going to be. What Apple and Android had, which BlackBerry didn't, was the thirst to win in the mobile phone business. Before there was Apple, BlackBerry used to be in my hands all the time. I would go to school with my BlackBerry and BBM friends throughout the entire school day. Then I would come home and scroll through Facebook and YouTube completely through my BlackBerry. My BlackBerry was the first mobile phone which had Wi-Fi on it, which means I could go on YouTube and I could watch movies, and it wasn't amazing, but it was good enough. BlackBerries were the first time where I didn't have to be dependent on my laptop or computer to watch YouTube videos. And for me not to see the BlackBerries not here anymore does leave a little hole in my heart. But at the same time, it does show if you remain ignorant to what the market says in business, you will fail. You have to listen to the market trends. I don't care how successful you were in the last year, the last 2 years, even the last 25 years. There have been so many companies over the years which remained completely in their narcissistic way of thinking to think we are the market leaders, no one will ever beat us. A good example of this was Blockbuster. Blockbuster actually had the opportunity to purchase Netflix very early on for a very cheap price. But because they kept on their high horse, because they were so deluded by all of their growth and all of their sales and all of their success, they just didn't do it. They didn't listen, they didn't learn, they didn't grow, they didn't innovate. And there are companies out there right now that are doing the same thing. And truthfully guys, one of those companies right now is Apple. And I'm worried if they don't listen to the market and innovate, they might end up in the dirt like BlackBerry too. That may sound inconceivable to you right now, but the truth is, at one point, everyone used to look up to BlackBerry the same way we look up to Apple right now. These days, BlackBerry has ditched their hardware business, the business which made them so successful in the first place, to rely solely on their software business. They made $830 million last year, so in a way, they're not a small company, however, they are a shell of their former selves. Will BlackBerry ever return to its former glory? No, I don't think so. Right now, Android and Apple dominate the market, and the truth is, the next evolution of tech isn't even cell phones anymore. We are in a transition stage where the next big thing in tech is just about to come up. We don't know what it is just yet, we don't know where we're gonna head, but it's definitely coming. My name is Hezron Springer, and this has been the rise and the fall of BlackBerry. This is the Hezron Springer Show.